Welcome back to episode 3 of the Keeping Goals podcast. We're here again, and today we've got something a little bit different. It's not a guest, it's not a talk about how we're doing, how's the vlog going. Today we're going to be going into a little bit more depth on some of the topics that we know you guys have got lots of questions about, and I'm interested to find out more. So yeah, I'm here again with Conor, as always, for the Keeping Goals podcast. Con, how's it going?
Yeah, all good, Johnny. Glad to be back. Glad to be making another podcast episode. We've had a little bit of a break, but we're back with, as you said, an interesting one today. I think all the goalkeeping nerds especially will enjoy today's podcast because we're diving deep on some goalkeeping analysis. I mean, we always say you see the pundits on TV watching games, giving analysis. There's very few goalkeeping pundits. We all know that as the GK Union. So we decided to dive into a little bit of goalkeeping footage, analyze, break down techniques, and hopefully, as a result, bring you guys some value as well.
Yeah, it should be a good one, so stick around. And if you haven't already, please give us a like. It would really help us out. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. And if you want to be around for Keeping Goals and more Keeping Goals podcast episodes, click that subscribe button. But should we get into it, Con?
Let's get cracking.
So here we are. It's the 26th of February when we're recording this. We're coming to kind of the almost the final third of pre-season. How have you been finding it?
Yeah, the longest pre-season known to mankind. I think in my career before this point, pre-season was pretty much just July. You turned up on the 1st of July, you did a couple of weeks of a lot of running and hard graft, finally got the footballs out. That was my experience in lower league English football especially. And then by the 1st of August, normally the season was getting underway. But yeah, here in Sweden, we started pre-season on the 6th of January. Our first league game isn't until the 4th of April. So we still have another chunky section of pre-season to go, but it's been going really well. For those of you that have been watching the Keeping Goals vlogs, you've obviously seen what we've been doing on the training side. We had our first pre-season friendly as well a couple of weeks ago against our local rivals in next season's league. So that was a good game, good to get playing again. But yeah, looking forward to this last month and really revving up the engine before the season starts itself.
Yeah, and of course, super cold this pre-season. One of the, if not the first because last season you weren't there for the full pre-season. You kind of came in the beginning of the season. Yeah. So now you've had a proper wintered pre-season full of snow, but it must be nice to be playing pre-season indoors in the domes.
Yeah, I mean, we've literally this week, you guys will see it on upcoming Keeping Goals vlogs, but literally this week we've started training outside again. We've had a little bit of a heat wave in Pitea. And when I say a heat wave, I mean that it's finally breached 0 degrees. We've had positive temperatures for the first time in the whole time that I've been here. And we've started to train outside, and that was freezing cold. I've got snoods on, hats on, coats on, and it's only kind of 1-2 degrees. I think if we'd have been training in -15, -20 that we had a few weeks ago, I'm not sure what would have happened. So I'm very grateful, especially now looking back, that we were training indoors for the majority of pre-season so far.
Yeah, so speaking of pre-season, and you mentioned it there, you had your first friendly versus Luleå. That's kind of what we're going to focus on a little bit more in depth later on in this episode. But yeah, just give me an overview. How did you find it? How was it being back out on the pitch?
Yeah, it was really good. I think the interesting thing with where we are in Pitea, we're located quite far north, obviously, in Sweden. So our pre-season games were scheduled against the teams which were within a close enough proximity that we could actually play matches. The majority of our league rivals for next year are kind of down south in Sweden, around the Stockholm area. But we had games against teams around us geographically. Some of those were in Division 1, like Luleå. We had some games scheduled against Division 2 teams, which was the league that we just got promoted from last season. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, those teams have not yet been allowed to start training, to start playing. So those games have been cancelled. So we've had a little bit of a reduced pre-season schedule, which is obviously frustrating. You want to play as many games as possible in pre-season to get used to your new teammates, to get settled, to get realizing how you guys want to play as a team. But to have that first pre-season friendly was really important. And we did, like you said, we had that friendly against Luleå, who only about 45 minutes away, they're a team which are quite interesting for us because they won Division Two. They were promoted from Division Two the year before we were. Last season, they managed to stay up. I think they finished about 12th in Etan Nora. So it's an interesting case study for us to have a look at. What did they do well last season? How do we compare against them? Because obviously, being newcomers in a league is going to be a tough ask. So to face them was interesting, not only from a 90-minute perspective, but also from a how do we compare against probably our biggest rivals in next season's league.
Yeah, and spoiler alert for those of you who haven't watched last episode or you want to find out later in this episode, you guys won. You won 1-0. So yeah, it was a strong start for your guys pre-season against the local rivals.
And I think it was an interesting game. I think we hadn't played them since I've been here. I've never played Luleå before, but obviously the two teams know of each other. And I think going into the game, they weren't sure what we were going to be like, but we started very, very strong in the game. The people that watch last week's vlog, you'll see how we performed, and we had a lot of chances. I think overall, we would probably say that we should have really scored more goals, and we were very solid. We managed to negate their kind of offensive structure quite well. We kept another clean sheet, which was very important for us as a defense, especially after last season when we managed to keep so many clean sheets. It's nice to see.
10 in a row now?
Yeah, I don't know what it is in a row, but it's nice to see that has continued into a second season, even with kind of the new players that have come in, that attitude to want to keep clean sheets, whether that's a league finale or a pre-season friendly. So from that perspective, it was very positive, and I thought we played very well as a team. There's lots of things we still need to work on, obviously, before we start the league season, but yeah, I think it was a result that probably surprised some people, but not for us in terms of how we performed. It was a good performance.
And speaking of work, most of the work this season, or sorry, this pre-season for you guys, has been done indoors. And unfortunately, you will have seen guys online, or you will have seen on Keeping Goals, the Pitea Dome was badly damaged during the storms this winter. So that forced you guys into a much smaller space than would have been ideal to train in. So I'm just curious, kind of from your perspective, what do you feel like has been some of the most challenging things to be facing in a smaller environment training? And also on the flip side of that, what do you think has really been a benefit for you guys from training in such a small environment compared to normal?
I think for those of you guys that have seen Keeping Goals, you might remember the big hall, and it was one of the kind of best facilities within Pitea. The fact that even in winter we could train in such a good indoor space, a full-size pitch, a great surface, and that's something which obviously in past pre-seasons has really aided not only the men's team but the women's team and even youth teams. And for that to be damaged and not able to be used, it threw up a lot of issues within Pitea as a whole, obviously with the football clubs. And I think for us as a team, you have that initial kind of frustration with the fact that preparations right at the very, very beginning of what's going to be a tough season haven't gone the way you want them to go. And I think everyone felt that frustration straight away. But out of kind of challenges and setbacks, there are always opportunities within them. And I think the fact that we did a lot of our training within quite a small hall, within the vlogs, people will have seen, it's almost like a 8-a-side, 9-a-side football hall. AstroTurf, full-size goals in there, but low ceilings, tight walls. Training a lot of hours in that kind of environment meant that we really had to tune up our game in terms of playing within tight spaces. Having a lot of players, can you play under pressure? Can you break through lines? Can you make sure that your work is kind of 2-touch instead of 3-touch or 4-touch? It's sped up a lot of thinking and a lot of action. And I think that was something which I was really impressed with. Once we then did have the pre-season friendly on the full-size pitch, we managed to translate that work onto a full-size match, an 11-a-side match, which was something which I wasn't sure how it was going to go, having spent so much time in a tight space. So it's definitely been kind of a hidden benefit and something which has helped us as a group. And for me as a goalkeeper as well, playing out from the back, in that tight space, I don't have that natural outball of clipping it out to a winger or playing a long pass to a striker, I have to be able to solve problems within
Yeah.
tight spaces. 2 touches, playing with my centre backs, playing with my deep midfielder, playing through a press. And for me, moving up obviously into a higher division with a more enthusiastic pressing game from other teams, that's going to be a skill that I need to be able to utilize. So it's been a benefit both for me personally and as a team. But I am very glad that we're now back outside training on the full size pitch again, because I had missed it.
Yeah, I suppose that's something I didn't actually consider, is that now that you're up at higher levels of the pyramid, you are going to be facing teams who have fitter players, faster players, stronger players, who will be pressing you a lot more aggressively. And to be able to play under that kind of spatial pressure and also time pressure in a smaller environment, that's going to be really crucial for you guys this season. And actually, yeah, maybe a positive thing that you guys had to start out preseason in a smaller environment.
And
And
I think
also
it's
one
something,
thing,
yeah, sorry,
sorry,
man.
yeah, no, one thing I think I maybe didn't consider, and it's the same in all sports. A lot of the time, you reduce the size of the pitch that you're working on throughout the sessions, throughout training, to put yourself under that spatial pressure or time pressure. So maybe it wasn't actually as big of a deal as we initially thought. Maybe it was just the final half hour of the session where things get put onto the big pitch that you guys were missing out on a little bit without having the dome there.
And it's about translating that skill now. Obviously, that now we're in the last month of pre-season, you need to translate it onto a full-size pitch. We're going to be playing our matches on a full-size pitch, not in a 7-a-side hall. So it's about translating that and using that in the right places. And I think for your first point, that's goalkeepers of all ages and all standards. That's something that we realize, be that, like you say, if you go up a league, or if you go up an age group, or you kind of graduate from the youth team to the first team, that's something that a lot of goalkeepers talk to me about. It's like, I can't handle the speed. I can't deal with the situations because it's so fast. And it's true, those first few sessions, I've been there, especially as a younger goalkeeper, you're just in panic mode because you can't see the solutions and everyone's shouting at you. Everyone's expecting you to be able to play these passes. But the more time that you spend in those situations, being under pressure, being uncomfortable, being out of your comfort zone, expands what you're able to deal with. So for goalkeepers of all ages and all abilities, that's very important that you put yourself in those situations so that it becomes second nature to you. And then, like you say, you go into a match and suddenly you can see the picture and everything's almost in slow motion, which is important for our position.
Right, let's move on to some in-depth analysis then. So, yeah, Con, what do you think your aim is with analysing footage a little bit more in depth like this?
Yeah, I think as goalkeepers, like I said in the beginning, it's important for us to analyze different types of footage to understand the thought process behind goalkeeping, because it's very easy for us to watch goalkeepers, especially at the top, and kind of appreciate the incredible work that they do. But there's so much value for us to take from breaking down each action and think about decision making, think about why they did certain actions. Unfortunately, because of various copyright reasons, we're not actually able to showcase Sky Sports kind of footage or Champions League footage, but we do have the footage from my games and from keeping goals and things like that. So we thought it might be quite interesting to break down situations and talk about what I was thinking, why I did things that I did. And we're going to do this in a way that, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can obviously see what we're talking about, but also for everyone listening on Apple or on Spotify, we'll talk about the overarching theory and why things are happening. So you shouldn't miss out too much in terms of the value being given.
Yeah, and so I've picked out a couple of scenarios from the weekend's friendly that I found particularly interesting, and I was basically curious and wanted to pick your brains about why you did what you did and what maybe would be changed in the future if you were in a situation like this again. So kind of just to go straight into the first situation, we're at 40 minutes into the game, almost 41 minutes. We're in your final third. So the opposition is attacking. They have a throw in on the sideline about 4 or 5 meters out from the touchline, and they're in a pretty strong position territorially, They've got 3 or 4 players in and around this throw in, but it's not been taken quickly. So, like, you guys have had time to set up. You've got a number of players around. And basically, yeah, so what happens here is the ball gets thrown in. There's a little bit of fumbling around to control the ball, but it's quickly brought under control by the opposition, and the ball. And then what happens at this point is your defenders are closing in, putting a little bit of pressure in on the players that are stood out on the wings. So I guess what I want to know initially is, we can see you in the shot here. You're stood in goal, and the ball is still out on the wing. So what's kind of initially going through your thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I think anytime that you're setting up for a set piece within the final third, be that a throw in, be that a free kick, be that a corner kick, you're obviously wanting to get everyone set up and into shape as quickly as possible. We've seen examples. The first one that springs to mind is kind of Liverpool's goal against Barcelona, where the corner kick was taken so quickly, the defense weren't set up, and you're giving away a goal. That can come from throw ins, free kicks, corners. You have to make sure you're in that set position as early as possible. So for my job as a goalkeeper, I can see the whole picture. I can see from the right wing, I can see from the right back to the left back. I can tell each and every player where their position is, or where it should be, who they should be marking. So initially, as soon as it goes out for a throw in, or as soon as a free kick or a corner is given, my job is to make sure that people are organized as quickly as possible and in the places that they should be. Sometimes you need to shout at others a little bit more, but you try and make sure that everything's set up properly. So what you're describing here is obviously the throw in. And after the initial kind of exchange, and as you say, the ball is then under control, I think the first thing that happens is, whenever we provide a structure as goalkeepers or as a team, and things are put in place, it's not always going to be the case. There's always going to be an element of surprise or an element of change within football. That's why we love it. And your job is to adapt as quickly as possible to that. So in this situation, my centre back gets dragged out of position from where he originally would probably want to be, which ends up leaving a striker pretty clear within the box to receive a pass. So my point then is, okay, this isn't ideal. My players aren't exactly where I would want them to be, but I can't waste time thinking, oh, that's annoying, he should have stayed there, because it's gone. All I can do is deal with the situation at that point as best as possible. So for those of you that are watching, you'll be able to see that kind of as the ball returns to the guy that originally took a throw in, he has a pass through to the striker. And if he makes that pass, the striker is in a good amount of space within the box, and he's able to probably turn and create an opportunity. So my job is to look at that picture and think, okay, what can I do? Can I bring in someone to mark him, or can I instruct them to try and cut off a passing lane? So if the player is behind them and they don't have time to recover and mark them up, can I instruct them to cover left or cover right in order to stop the pass breaking through that pressure? That's something that from this clip I probably should be doing a little bit better, because you see kind of my centre midfielder, he's stuck looking at the ball. And if I give him a little bit more information about where he needs to position in order to stop that pass going through him, that might prevent that opportunity. But for whatever reason, it gets through. And then it's about readjusting to the next situation that is under development.
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, he's about 10 feet ahead of the open attacker at that point. And are you kind of trying to say that maybe you should be yelling at your defender here and saying, like, left shoulder, right shoulder, or which side he needs to be more aware of? I mean, for those of you who aren't watching, and also we're slowing this down, I mean, this all happens very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's completely understandable that this player gets maybe a foot out of position and this pass goes through, because it is that finer margin at this point. But is that something that you'd be maybe shouting a bit more in the future?
Yeah, and I mean, because of that, like you say, the fine margins and the speed that this happens, especially as you go higher up, these situations happen quicker. You probably only have time to give one instruction. So this is another element of goalkeeping. You need to make sure that your talking and your instructions are as clear and precise as possible, but also as efficient as possible. So I don't want my instruction to be, Axel, just be careful because he's moving slightly to your left.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that my instruction is, Axel, cover left, or
Yeah.
Axel, shift left. I need to make sure that my instructions are really effective and really efficient. So that's a skill that you develop within goalkeeping. The other skill is to make sure that you're not just ball watching. I'm not just looking at the guy with the ball. I need to be aware of where the striker is, where my players are. That's something which over time and with experience develops into kind of almost second nature with goalkeeping, that you're always scanning. But it is a difficult skill, and especially for younger goalkeepers, you have to try and make sure that you're talking all the time and you're reading information and relaying it as effectively as possible. My dad always used to say to me that whenever the ball got kind of within the 18-yard box, I'd always go quiet. Right. And that was because I knew that at those points I was concentrating so much on like where my positioning needed to be, like what I needed to do to reduce the chances of conceding a goal. But I suddenly forgot to talk to my defenders. So again, it's a skill that you develop as you get a bit older, but it's a very, very important one. If you can be an extremely effective communicator, you can almost probably prevent 90% of the chances that you're going to face. And suddenly you're conceding a lot less goals without actually doing anything different in terms of your physical actions.
So, yeah, just playing this forwards, this pass gets nicely threaded from the wing into this free open player who is stood kind of at the edge of the box still, really. He does well. He takes a turn. What's your thought process now? This ball is with the attacker. What are you focusing on now?
So now that I know he's got space and time, he's either going to pass or he's going to shoot. So my first priority is to make sure that I'm in the best position possible to cover as much of the goal as possible with a shot. So as soon as he's turning and facing the goal, I then have a decision to make about where I position. Do I come a couple of yards further forward to try and reduce the size of the target? Or do I read the picture in front of me and make my decision based on that? And that's what I tried to do. For those of you watching, you kind of see my defender come into cover. He's almost leaning to one side to try and cover the far post, which is really kind of intelligent play as a defender. I love it when I work together with my centre-backs, with my defenders, to cover as much of the goal as possible. The goal is a very, very large area. If it's just me trying to defend its entirety, it's going to be a very difficult job. But the fact that he's almost leaning to cover that kind of curling effort to the far post means that I know the higher likelihood is that he's going to try and go for a near post shot.
Right.
If my defender, for example, was a yard to his left and upright, I think it's more likely that he's going to try and bend it round him into the far top corner. So again, goalkeeping, reading the positions, reading the situation in front of you. And it's all happening at super speed. So you have to make sure you're adapting really quickly. So as soon as he kind of has the opportunity to make a strike, I have to be in the best position possible. If it's a worldy goal, they happen. Like you kind of hold your hands up and go, right, great goal. But for this one, he tries to have a shot back across with the front post, a curling effort. It's not right in the top corner. It's not right in the bottom corner. I probably, as I said in the vlog, I probably could have tried to catch it. But given that I know there's a lot of bodies in the box, that I know that there's people going to be following it in, I kind of almost elect for the safer option of just parrying it out for a corner.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was interesting watching this back and analysing it myself was up until literally the shot was taken, the camera angle doesn't really show what's happening in the middle of the box. And then I was really surprised slowing this down that, like you say, I think you had the awareness and you were scanning all this point that you kind of knew that there was going to be a runner running central. Like watching this back personally, I didn't know that there was a runner central until I was pausing it and looking at each kind of frame by frame. What I think was kind of a threat for you at this point, the shot's taken, the ball's in the air, the attacker that's running central, he's side by side with your player who's coming back to defend. And by the time that you get hands on ball, the attacker is maybe a pace or two towards you than your defender is. So I think what was really interesting to analyze and to notice here, frame by frame, was that maybe if you'd made the decision to come a yard or two further forwards to make yourself bigger and the goal angle smaller, and that ball had come to you faster, there's potential there for the ball to meet you in your hands, you not to time it, and that ball to drop to your feet. And at that point, their attacker has made that run from however many yards out, but he's the first one to you out of anyone at that point. So I think what was interesting, and it's something that we spoke to the Modern Day GK about in the vlog we did with them, was having a little bit more depth and giving yourself a millisecond or two more time. Yeah, okay, maybe you say you should have maybe taken that, but maybe even if you don't time it as well as you could have done, you've given yourself the time to make a decision to parry it away from this central runner in a situation which you made it a lot better than it could have been. I think that slight misposition there, that could have been a much more risky chance for the opposition than it ended up being.
And I mean, you're the engineer, you'll be able to tell me the actual equation, but I'm not sure what the reduction in reaction time is from being half a meter further forward. And it almost looks kind of, when it reaches me, that it's almost kind of slower. And I think that is because you've given yourself as much reaction time as possible. And you're able to literally think, do I catch or do I parry? Yeah. If I'm a meter further forward, you might just be trying to get anything on it and you have no idea where it's going to rebound to. So like you say, having that extra kind of time to react gives you the decision of where you want to parry instead of just get anything on it to keep it out.
Yeah. Well, it's actually Suvat equations. For those of you doing your...
I was joking, GCSE, but he does actually know.
Speed equals distance over time. So, I mean, if you half your distance or you reduce your distance and you rearrange that equation, your time goes down. So, I mean, there you go.
The goalkeeping engineer, new niche.
Yeah, let's make a secondary channel and let's do all the equations about shooting and goalkeeping. No, yeah, that was an interesting one for me, and I think you've broken that one down really nicely. Obviously, if you guys have any more questions about this particular chance, and you're watching online on YouTube, or if you're listening on the podcast on Spotify or Apple, drop a comment or drop a DM over on Instagram, and we can try and answer as best as we can. Should we move on to the next analysis point?
Let's do it.
Okay, so moving on to the next point that I've picked out for you to analyse, Con. We're about 68 minutes through the game now, through the pre-season friendly. Crossing and taking balls in the air is something that's obviously vital for goalkeepers. And I think watching this particular cross back, my initial response, okay, this ball comes from the attacker is just entered the final third, and he puts in this really loopy, deep ball, and it goes beyond your back post. So my initial thoughts when watching this one back was, okay, so that ball comes up, it's quite loopy. What was going through your mind, and how come you made the decision not to come for that initial ball?
So I think, just to kind of preface it, I think crosses are one of the most difficult areas of goalkeeping. I get a lot of questions from people asking about taking crosses, how you improve taking crosses. And a lot of it comes from repetitions, not so much in terms of technique of taking crosses, but more so of understanding situations and making decisions. And every goalkeeper is different in terms of how they take crosses. If you compare Courtois to David De Gea, for example, in terms of the radius that they are willing to come for crosses, there's a huge difference. And that's down to personal preference about how you play, your kind of physical attributes, all those type of things. So every goalkeeper must have a very good understanding within themselves about how far they're willing to come. So as soon as I'm looking at kind of this situation, I'm not sure if it's the right back or the right winger, but he's got quite a lot of time out wide to put in a cross. So a cross under pressure is less likely to be accurate than a cross with someone that has a lot of time to pick their head up and actually pick out a target. So I know initially that as soon as he puts in a cross, it's more likely to go where he wants it to go. There's going to be less variance within the cross. I also have a kind of centre forward attacking the very central area of the goal, and he's 1v1 against my centre back. I know that if he puts in a quite a flat, fast cross, I trust my centre back to win it, but I also know that the risk for me is higher in engaging in that opportunity. So my set position is a little bit deeper than it would be if he was 5 yards further back or coming in from an angle, for example. I'm trying to wait and see what is the biggest risk. The biggest risk is that the cross goes straight to that centre forward's head and he can have a shot on target. So my starting position is actually quite deep in the goal. When he does put in the cross and you realise it's loopy, you then have a decision to make about whether you come and collect or whether you drop off onto your line to give yourself more reaction time for the eventual header. It's quite a high cross, and it eventually probably lands just about on the far line of the 6-yard box. So as I'm looking at it, the cross is coming in from my left-hand side, and it probably lands right on the far side of the 6-yard box with a winger attacking it at the back post. I could make the decision to come and try and intercept that before it hits the winger and my fullback to try and claim it in between, which if my positioning was a little bit higher, I might have made that decision. But as I said before, I decided to be a little bit deeper due to where the striker was.
Right.
And that's led me to think the risk of me not getting there is if I don't make it, I'm in no man's land, and he has a very free header to head it back into the goal. But weigh that up against if I stay, his positioning, if he's trying to score with a very kind of outstretched header back across goal from almost the far side of the 6-yard box, I'm pretty confident 9 times out of 10 he's not going to beat me from there with a header. So weighing up the risks of the two actions, it was almost kind of, with that one, I'm going to drop off, give myself enough reaction time, and then adapt to what he does with his header.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this and pausing it frame by frame, it is coming in at a pretty steep angle. And when I say loopy cross, like, this is coming maybe at a 45-degree angle at the very, the last 7 or 8 feet of this cross. It's like really dropping down. For you to get out and to be in a position to take that, it's quite it's the altitude of that ball, let's say the height of that ball is changing very quickly because it's coming down at a steep angle. So if you mistime your meeting of that ball with it being a steep angle of attack on that ball, if you mistime yourself on how you come out to meet that ball, there's a very easy chance that misses your hand by like a few inches or maybe like a little bit more than that because of how steep that ball is. I think what was interesting for me, like, I didn't realize that this is something that I didn't notice when I was watching it back, is that, like you say, there was a central attacking player and your centre-back were on the penalty spot and they were the first biggest threat. That's something I didn't even notice to begin with. I saw this ball coming in and I thought, why didn't Conor even go for that, But that makes a lot of sense. You had to weigh up what was the biggest threat at that point. And like you say, this guy who eventually gets the ball on the 6-yard box on the edge, he's so deep at that point that really his header back to you, that's not a threat, because he's not going to try and, unless he really gets above the ball and can head it down to you near post, or he can get under it and loop it back over the top of you to the far post. There's really not a threat from him, but his best bet is to try and get it back into the middle of the box to his other teammate. Kind of fast forwarding this, he gets his head on the ball, it's coming into the box now, and his header back into the box is loopy as well. So it's not just like a perfectly flat header back across the goal. It's a loopy across the goal header. So explain to me a little bit about how you then decide that you're going to take this ball in particular.
So once you've decided not to come, you drop a little bit deeper onto your line. The best goalkeepers are the ones I love watching De Gea with this. De Gea actually very rarely comes and collects crosses. And it's probably because he's one of the best of the world at this. So instead of coming to collect the cross, he decides to drop a little bit deeper to his line, reaction times, and he's not actually watching the ball. He switches his gaze before the ball's got there to the attacker so that he can read the body language of the attacker in order to predict almost where the ball's going to go. And that's an amazing skill. So almost in terms of when the cross is coming in, as soon as I know that I'm not coming to collect it, I'm already looking at the attacker and thinking, okay, what can he do? So as soon as I see that he's straining for the ball and he's just trying to get anything on it to put it back in, you'll actually see that in the clip, if you're watching, my eyes are looking at the attacker, not looking at the ball, so that I can read as much of his body language as possible. So when he's straining to win that header and head it back in, he loops it back up and back into a dangerous area because he knows that people are going to be attacking it. Now, this is one of the more dangerous parts of goalkeeping. When you come and collect a ball, which is almost looping and dropping vertically down, you have to have your eyes on it so that you can catch it. But you also know that you're probably going to get hit by an attacker, probably your defender as well, maybe another attacker for good luck. And depending on what league you're playing in, that impact might be quite nasty. It might be some elbows, might be some knees, might be whatever. So it's one of the more difficult, and it's why goalkeepers are so brave. You're almost exposing your whole body to a proper impact from people coming in. But all that you can think about is, how do I make sure that this ball doesn't go in the goal? So as it's looping down, my job is to take it as high as I can, whilst also maintaining a very kind of strong core and a strong body so that I don't get barreled over the goal line. So as the looping head is coming back, I try and take it as high as safely possible and then brace myself for impact. And depending on the leagues, when I've played in lower leagues in England, I know that I could get a proper nasty whack from a 6'4", 15-stone striker and the referee won't even blink, compared to playing in Spain, whereas if I get sneezed on, then the referee might give me a foul. You have to be aware of what leagues you're playing in as well. So Sweden's a little bit in between the two. I kind of find with Sweden, if you have good control of the ball and you take an impact, the referee will normally give you a foul. But if it's 50-50 and it's there to be won, then they might let it to play on. So I think with this one, in my younger days, I might have elected to punch just to get it clear, knowing that the impact was going to be powerful, and knowing that being a smaller keeper, especially when I was younger, a little bit lighter, I might not have been able to deal with that as well. Now that I'm a bit older, a bit stronger, a bit bigger, I can be quite confident that I can take that impact well. And you'll see that on the clip, when I do actually get hit by the players, you can't even see me, but you can see the ball kind of outstretched from my arms, and that's to make sure that it doesn't get pushed back over the line.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. As a younger keeper in that situation who maybe is a bit lighter, maybe you go for the safest option, which is to punch and clear. But in this situation, you've got quite a strong position. And actually, you said to me before we were recording this that you knew that you were going to be taller with your arms up than anyone could possibly be at that point when you were jumping. I've seen you jump about twice as high as what you decided or unconsciously decided to jump in this. And this is just my take on this, but I think maybe that you knew you were bracing for that impact. You knew you had to be in a strong position. You've caught the ball with not fully outstretched arms, but strong grip on the ball from the side. You've then jumped, but you've returned to the ground a lot sooner than you would have done if you jumped a foot higher. And I think that's due to the fact that you knew you just needed to get as high as safe and get to the floor, and you've put yourself then in, when you've returned to the ground, in a very strong position to be able to withstand the attacker and actually your defender who come tumbling into you. What was interesting watching this back as well is the attacker who ended up running into you, he started outside the D. Like, he came in, he wouldn't have been in your peripheral until like, well, maybe you saw him at the very start of this play, at the very beginning of the cross. Maybe you were assessing at that point. But when the ball was deep and it was headed and looped back over, I don't think, unless you've been really scanning, you've got really good peripheral, you probably just were aware but didn't fully see this guy coming in. So for you to still have the awareness to know, I need to take this in a strong position, I think that ultimately you could have been a foot further into your goal, and maybe you would have caught it, but maybe you would have been a foot further into your goal. So yeah, good awareness there from you.
And I think that comes with experience as well. I've had plenty of times where you get absolutely smashed. And in these situations, you know what's coming as a goalkeeper. You know, as soon as it loops up, you think, I've got to look at this, but I know it's going to hit me. And part of it is out of your control. You hope that it's not too powerful. You hope that you make the right decision in terms of catching or punching. But with this one, like you say, if you're in midair, you can't control where you go. They can barrel through you. You can go wherever.
Yeah.
So if you can be as quick as possible to get a ground in, then you've got more chance, if you're trying to hold the ball, of being able to absorb the impact. I remember seeing a clip of Pitea, who, I'm not sure what the game was. I think it was Chelsea versus Arsenal, an FA Cup game very early. You'll have to go and have a look at the clip, because he comes and takes a cross, a little bit different because he's coming to collect a cross, so he has the momentum instead of it dropping down on top of him. But I think John Terry, maybe Sol Campbell, big players come in to challenge him, and the rest of them are left on the floor, and he's just there holding the ball. And that comes from all the work that we do as goalkeepers on the pitch, yes, but also away from the pitch. So the strength and conditioning stuff, we have to do so much work on our core stability, on our core strength, on making sure that, yes, you have your upper body strength, your lower body strength, but it all works in unison, and that you can be resistant to impact. So even thinking of kind of rugby players, when they go up and take those balls which are looping down and they know they're going to get hit, you have to be very strong and braced for that impact. So it's a small thing, but it's something which definitely accumulates from all the work that you do on and off the pitch in order to develop that strength. And it comes with age, but it's something that you can definitely work on as a goalkeeper, because it was something I was very weak at when I was younger, and it's something that I've tried to really improve.
Yeah. No, that's great. But yeah, lastly, before we finish this segment, I would just say in rugby, you're not allowed to be touched in the air. So
really,
yeah, I mean, if you're in the air, you're safe. And then
that's a nice rule.
As soon as your feet touch the floor, you're fair game. You know, you get absolutely smashed. So maybe football needs to take a little bit of something out, out of the law set of rugby.
Yeah, the Spaniards would probably agree with you. I mean, we're going off a little bit off topic here, but I love the Irish fullbacks in rugby when they take it like a goalkeeper, when they take the ball above their head from like all the Gaelic football they've been playing and things like that. I think that's incredible. But yeah, quite a similar skill for cross sport. But that's a nice rule to.
It's a nice
should bring that in for goalkeepers.
Friendly rule. Yeah. Some more friendly rules in football for goalkeepers, please.
Yeah.
So, lastly, final month of pre-season pretty much has started. You're out on the pitch, as you mentioned earlier now. Snow piled up to the sides.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling for it? How are you feeling for the last month?
Yeah, really good. Definitely brings flashbacks of our trip to Stockholm, playing outside with all that snow. But it's nice to get back out on the pitch, as you say. But I think final month, you're trying to tune up, ready for the season to start. And I think there's quite a lot of similarities with what we're going through here with our pre-season. And given the kind of recent announcements for sport back in the UK, fingers crossed, a lot of kind of grassroots sport. I know that a lot of people watching this and listening to this will be kind of eagerly waiting the return of grassroots football and amateur football. And hopefully that should be coming back at a similar time, kind of end of March, beginning to middle of April, touch wood. So hopefully there's some kind of lessons which we can help with and translate to, because we've had this winter. I think there's been a variety of training for people in terms of what they've been doing over lockdown, kind of maintaining fitness or working on different areas of their game, especially goalkeeping. But what can they be doing in this kind of last month before football returns to get prepped? And I'm exactly the same. I've done kind of my hard training, my heavy training, both in the gym, on the pitch, a lot of double days, a lot of work. But my focus within this last month is really about tuning that up as much as possible. Probably reducing load, especially in the gym in terms of weight. So instead of very, very heavy weight working on strength, probably bringing that back and taking the focus more to speed, power, plyometric work. And then within my training on the pitch, tuning up of technical stuff. So my distribution, my first touch, taking all the lessons that I've learned in this preseason so far and polishing it up as much as possible. And I think that's the same for everyone weighting football. Can you identify the areas now that hopefully you've been doing the training, you've been doing the base work, but can you really identify the areas that you want to tune up as much as possible and get 100% ready for when the games come back? So I'm really looking forward to the league starting back up again. I think it'll be great fun to get going with it. I hope people really enjoy it as we kind of get into the league and start to see how that journey goes and document that with keeping goals. But yeah, it's an exciting time. I think by the end of preseason, I'll be raring to go and get started with it. So looking forward to it.
Any more preseason friendlies to come?
Yeah, we've got one tomorrow, which is just amongst us. So I think we've got an 11v11 because we were supposed to be playing a Division 2 team, which has been cancelled. So we're doing an internal 11v11, which will probably end up more competitive and more violent than any game with an external opposition. But
I'm sure.
We've got hopefully a game next week against Umea, who are another relatively close team. They came down from the S2Ep3, which is the second tier in Sweden, and they'll be playing in our league next year. So that'll be a really interesting test to have a look at a team that have been at a higher level and come down. And obviously for us coming up, it'll be good to test ourselves against them.
That'll be really interesting to measure up against those guys.
And I think we probably have one more against Luleå as well. We've got Umea, we've got Luleå, and then I think we were supposed to maybe do a test run of a trip to Stockholm and play one of them in a friendly as well. So hopefully at least 3 more friendlies before the season starts.
Brilliant. Well, guys, drop your best wishes and best luck to Conor for his pre-season friendlies that will be coming up. It'll be really interesting to hear about those and to also see those on the Keeping Goals vlogs that will be coming up in the next few weeks. So yeah, just a reminder, if you're not already subscribed and you want to be up to date with what's happening on in the preseason friendlies and into the season, make sure you click that subscribe button. We'll be posting every week on a Sunday with the Keeping Goals vlogs, and we'll be back for some more Keeping Goals podcast episodes very soon.
And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure you subscribe on there as well. And on Apple Podcasts, if you fancy leaving us a nice 5-star review, that'll be very grateful. You can even put your little Instagram handle in there and I can say thank you for that as well. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, guys. Thank you for joining us yet again, and I hope it brought you some value. But good to do it again, Johnny.
Yeah, we'll be back soon.
Take care, guys. Speak to you later.